Topics. Anything? Oh, yes. This meeting. What else? Anything from last week? And the football experience, this will see what has been done for that. And I think that's good. Okay. Demos. So last week we had been suggested to do a demo on JSON schema. I don't remember what it means.
Yeah, I'm still up to do that one. It'll be interesting.
Okay, well, first you. Last week, William suggested to do a demo on Stripe, but I saw in the chat that you said, why not Bulma?
Yes, let's do a demo on Bulma.
Okay. How related to Orchard is it?
Bulma is a CSS framework, and it's a lot easier to integrate than, say, Bootstrap. So
I know what Bulma is, and that's why I was asking how.
Well, I also integrated Webpack into Visual Studio, so you can build the whole CSS through Visual Studio and Webpack.
Okay, so let's see what Bulma looks like. Seb, that's me, shortcodes. Okay, anything else? New sites, improvements on the taxonomy localization, or? Okay, just shout if you want to show something. What did I miss here? No news. Okay, good. So status, Orchard 1, we didn't mention anything, but Matteo did because we approved these pull requests. So here, process ignore path while being aware of RequestUrlPrefix. I think we saw that last week, so it's been merged. Did we see that? I'm not sure. Process ignore path while being aware of RequestUrlPrefix in the cache. I don't remember where it is in Notepad. Maybe issues between Notepad and the multi-tenant stuff. Okay. But we approved the PR 2 weeks ago. Tokens sort criteria, and in this case, we have to look at the PR. So maybe you can tokenize sort criteria, but that doesn't look like, oh yes, maybe, I don't know. State. I don't know what it's doing. Okay, so pull requests closed. This one. Tokenize the state for sort criteria. That's more meaningful. Okay, so now you can tokenize the sort criteria. Okay. Good. Here it's time for 1.11. I think Matteo talked about it, and it might be releasing 1.11. Did we ship actually a 110X recently, or we were supposed to? They were supposed to release 1.10.3 before 1.11. So release 1.10.3, which had started, and I think Benedek stopped doing the process, and then, oh no, 1.10.3. And then we ship it. So maybe, yes, 1.11. No, it was a year ago. So was it the one I was talking about, or do we ship 1.11? I don't remember. But yes, we can ship 1.11. That Orchard core updates. So I updated that. This was last week. Here the second, and around that time. So am I on the dev branch? I can filter dev branch. Okay. So the second, here, update contributors, fix publish header controls, disappearing on validation error, the unfixed is module. So when there is a validation error, it will still return the edit with the current context, so we don't lose the state. Disable required move fields to below larger editors. Dim, maybe you drink too much. Disable required move fields to below larger editor.
Maybe that's just one of the commits that I did, and somebody didn't update the title quite right, yes. But that's the changes to the blog post, I think.
Must be a French person. No, that's you. I don't know. I don't see the committer here. Okay, so moving stuff.
So that was moving all the blog post fields to below the HTML, or the markdown part, and making them non-required.
I tried it, it worked. Add default edit display option for the publish header part. This is, if we want to be able to customize that, we need a default. So you made the default.
Yeah, because somewhere we added support for the edit mode feature, and when we have the edit mode feature, we need the default there, or when you add your own in, you only get your own and you can't shift back to the standard.
Or if you add your own, you need to add the standard also.
Exactly.
Okay. It worries me that it will mean that every time we do a part, we will have to create a standard one.
It's unfortunately how the system works, because it searches the shapes for an edit option.
I'm sure we have many parts without the default one.
That's true, but we added a lot of defaults a while ago, so we should be okay. But it's not ideal having to add them all the time for little reason.
Yeah, maybe we could make it by default have a default.
Yeah, it would make sense because it's the same every time. So it's probably just a matter of having the default and some alternates.
One that is actually setting the current editor to nothing, so that will just work. Okay, and we might call it default or whatever. Okay. Reviewing encoder usages due to a bug when you send emails that your char might be JSON encoded, because the default encoder for the emails was JSON. Well, for any workflow activity was JSON, so this has been fixed. And also some encoders were redefined based on what we were using. Like in this case, the email here we are injecting the HTML encoder. So we get the one that has been set for Orchard because HTML encoders can be configured. I will show you why. And then when we render the email body, whatever you type in the email body, if you inject some liquid, then if you use liquid tags, these tags, if it's an HTML body, will be HTML encoded. If it's a text body, they won't be HTML encoded. So if you happen to inject something that might contain some HTML, it will be encoded. So if you really want to inject HTML, then you have to do a pipe raw, like at HTML raw in Razor. So that's for the email. And what I was saying is that by default, ASP.NET when it injects its HTML helpers, it will encode all the Unicode chars. So if you have accents in the text, or if you have Greek chars or any other Unicode char, they will be encoded. So you will see ampersand, a number, semicolon, instead of seeing the actual character, even if the browser supports Unicode. Okay, so to prevent that, you can in your app, you can configure the web encoder option to say the text encoder settings is accept all Unicode ranges, meaning don't encode anything that is based on Unicode ranges. It will still encode HTML, but any char that is a Unicode char will still be written as a Unicode char, not as an HTML entity, or a URL entity, or a JSON entity, and so on. It's better to just opt in for the ranges that you want, but in this case, it's just a sample code to show you how to remove that. So if you look at your source code, when you use such chars, you will see you will have lots of entities, HTML entities, instead of the chars that you wrote. So once you do that, it will be the actual chars. And also, when you need to use an encoder, just resolve it in a constructor because the encoders are registered in a DI using these arguments. If you don't want these arguments for custom piece of code, then don't resolve the encoder, use HTML encoder the default, and that will be it. Fix typo. I never do typos. Someone must have injected it by mistake. Coming soon in fixes. There were some issues with the form CSS anti-forgery. And then, did you see Din that it confused Niraj?
I did see that, yeah.
So exactly.
And somewhere in the documentation, we should make it a little clearer that they're very much just sample themes.
That's what I think, but maybe everyone will disagree. I think that the themes that we ship are not meant to be, oh, use this theme, it's the best ever, it's production ready, and this will solve all your issues. And it will solve all your issues. No, they are just samples for a sample blog, a sample single page for an agency, a sample coming soon theme, and they show different things. Like the agency is showing a complex back part to show a single content item for the landing page. You can drag and drop content. The blog is showing blogs, tags, taxonomy, stuff like this. The coming soon is as a form and a workflow. And I think they should be samples. You can use them if they fit your needs, but I don't want the themes to be the opportunity to add anything that we could think could be related to this site. For instance, I don't think the coming soon theme, we should handle that it can have any other page. We don't have a template for that. The source theme we are using doesn't have a template for that, I think. Or the blog might not have all the options that you can have on a blog. Okay. So
yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of agree with that because there's there's so many reasons, but there is a huge amount of opportunity here for other people to make themes that are more complete and are not sample themes, you know, contribution themes. We saw one a couple of weeks ago from Sitka, and it looks great, and that's the thing we should probably focus on, rather than trying to make our themes do everything.
Yeah. I have some other repositories with complete solutions for my special blog for Orchard, which does all the things I like. Because we can't sustain any feature that then someone will want on the blog. And at the same time, maybe someone doesn't care about 99% of the feature that we provide, and it will be a bloated solution for a blog. So yeah, that's the idea. Doc contrib guide, MK docs fixes, clarifying, configuration docs. So more docs. More docs. Contributing. Okay. Reference doc pages for missing features. So yeah, so I assume all the readmes are created even if they are empty. So it's like an entry point to add more things. Why that decision to change that? Where is it coming from? I think it looks ugly when we have that. Let's see. If I take themes, where reference, it's okay. Maybe it was the old theme that it looked ugly. Okay. Boom. Update Orchard core shell database doc. Yes, someone filed an issue saying that when you change that, it still asks you to use SQLite, but the issue was that it's not meant to be able to change what database you use in the setup. It's meant to define where you store your tenant information. If you want to store them in a database, that's what you use, Orchard shell's database configuration. Like you could store them in Azure Blob Storage, Azure Tables, so wherever you want. Because if you store them like today in a file, then when you scale out, if you create a tenant on one node, the other node doesn't know about it. So that's why we need a shared storage for the tenants themselves. And then this database contains the connection strings for each of the tenants. Fix, and here, yeah, the format is now using underscores to be compatible with Linux. Fix resource hash for conmural CSS. How did it ever work? I don't understand.
Well, it didn't. It just gave an error in the console, which I happen to see because I have the console open a lot.
But conmural will not work.
Code Mirror would. This is just a CSS plugin, so the CSS formatting.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, good. This morning I merged PR from Antoine that updates the go to 3.15, latest fresh from this morning, security fix. Merge this one from Dean that fixes. Why? Oh, because now it's no more necessary to update the HTTP client. Okay, thank you. Took me some time to make it work. So fixed a change I did that was breaking the Twitter client. I don't understand why it broke, but why?
It's registered in DI.
And I don't care. I'm not using it. I mean,
the workflow task injects it from DI.
The workflow task injects it from DI. But yes, well, it can register it. It injects it or registers it?
Well, the startup registers it with the HttpClientFactory.
Maybe there's a special
then
pattern.
the workflow task is then able to inject it because it's been registered in DI, and the factory resolves it and manages the disposal and the HTTP message handler, which is the one that causes the issues.
Yeah, but the issue is that when it tries to resolve Twitter client, it says, I don't know, it's missing or it can't find any. So it looks like it's not just a registration. It's like forcing the Twitter client to use something.
Yeah, that's how the HTTP client factory works, is you have to have a HTTP client in your constructor as your first parameter.
I like to know how it works. That's weird.
Yeah, it's the pattern I've been using for HTTP client for a little while now. When I've got DI and I'm not using a static.
Good. Update ImageSharp package, new RC3, initialize setup supported. So this is because we just want on the setup screen on the setup screen and also the list of supported cultures to have the ones. Let me think. Yeah, we can still, well, these are the default supported cultures. We just want the ones that have at least a good setup screen, full setup screen, or a good translation coverage. Okay, because it doesn't make sense to show, for instance, Slovak. It doesn't have any translation. So if you select Slovak, you won't see any change. It will still fall back to English or whatever is your current culture. So in this case, this is a list that follows that rules. You can still add on the back end the cultures you want to translate your site in. That's completely independent. But for the front-end localization, these are the ones that we show by default. Then you can still change that if you have a localization file that is not on NuGet and not referenced by the Orchard packages, and that's okay. I haven't tried that, just fresh from this morning. The only thing is that there's been so much work on the Portuguese Brazilian one that we should maybe include it, but it was not even listed there before. And I wonder how different is Portuguese Brazilian to Portuguese to require its own language file. We don't have French Canadian or French Belgian. We don't have Spanish Mexican, but we have a Portuguese Brazilian. I'm not good enough in Portuguese Brazilian to say if it could be Portuguese. So sad. We don't have American English. UK is Ukrainian, by the way, but we don't have American English, we have English. That's why, so sad. Okay, we asked for Serbian Cyrillic and Serbian Latin. We asked and they mentioned, no, it should be two different languages, definitely. So this is okay. Same thing for Chinese traditional and Chinese traditional and
I would have said standard, but I could be wrong.
Mandarin. Okay, so that is the last PR we merged this morning. Now for RC2, I think there is nothing more blocking. We talked last week about a PR from Jean-Thierry, but I think it's not blocking RC2. Let me see. The translation. So chat French Canadian and French are pretty much the same. We don't write French Canadian slang generally. Yes, yeah. So I agree. Well, actually, I agree. I wanted to ask you because in the French websites, well, just if you go to a French website from France, you don't have any issue with that. I'm sure I will find some words in Canadian not the standard French, but you don't need a different file for custom. But Portuguese might be completely different with Brazilian.
Well, so we have expressions, but it's not. It's used when we talk with people, but when we write documents, we try to have the same French than you use in France. But you also have expression like shopping, which is supposed to be accepted in France that we don't use, but we can use it also in Quebec. So yeah, you can have two different files, but normally I don't use it because I don't make a distinction for both languages, which is almost the same.
So some words are spelled differently. Same thing for American English and standard English.
Yeah, it's like Mexican Spanish and Portuguese or something like that. Brazil. They have a different way to speak Spanish.
Yeah, different words.
But we use the same words than you guys do, so it's.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm saying. Maybe it's different in Portuguese and Brazilian.
I guess that's okay. Because we are less educated than you.
We should ask translation.
There's not such thing as a French-Canadian translation on Google Translate, for example.
Well, I'm not. So if I go to Portuguese Brazilian. How can we see who updated it? Sometimes I see the names, but here, because if I look at the PRs, I don't think it's written. It's just everything from Antoine, because he's using his account to commit everything, so we can just see.
At the root, there is.
We don't hear you, Antoine.
Yes, choppy.
Yeah, go back to the root or chart core. Go back to the root.
Activity.
And go to activity tab.
Thank you.
And you can see that this is Anzo that translated the Brazilian.
Okay, thank you.
But if you want to have a French-Canadian translation in Proudhon, I would suggest to no, okay. But you could have copied the one from France.
Yeah, that's my concern. Maybe if we copy the Brazilian one to Portuguese, it will help lots of Portuguese speakers. Or maybe they will find Portuguese Brazilian and will say, okay, let's use that because this is the one that is available. That will work.
Because for example, here, if I use the localization module, I'm not going to have a specific culture set because I want to reach people from France and Quebec. So if you know what I mean here. And if I set up FRFR and FRCA, then I'm going to need to have two different PO files.
Yeah. Some people might want it, but okay, most cases you don't want that. So milestones, RC2, ready. So just update the translation and we ship. When I say update the translation, we need to push the packages on uget.org, reference the packages and ship. We need to merge dev into RC2 because there has been some changes on dev in the meantime and nothing not worthy of RC2. So that's a good thing. Thank you, Antoine, for not merging for once all the things that will not make it to RC2, but could have made it to dev. So that will be less work to do. And I think we are ready. Actually, yes. Right. There was no significant issues in the last 2 weeks that will block anything. People have tested. I have tested also. There is one issue with PostgreSQL on GraphQL, but there is a way to mitigate that with a custom collation. But that is fine. Unless Carl fixes it tomorrow before we ship on Thursday, for instance. We'll see. Good. Demos, Dean.
Sure. Let me share my screen. Okay, let me know when you can see that well.
All good.
Okay, so I've been doing a little bit of work with APIs and OpenAPI and Swagger recently for a number of different reasons, and it's led to an interesting new NuGet package for Orchard Core for it. We've seen Swagger before, but I will show it. What we often do is we work with Angular or sometimes a C# client when we're using Xamarin and when we're building our APIs. We'll often use a Swagger toolchain called NSwag. Now what this will do is build a TypeScript client or a C# client, which we can use in Xamarin, which will give you all of the models from your controllers, an HTTP client that's kind of ready to use out of the box. And it's all generated out of a Swagger document. So we find it incredibly useful because we do a lot of work with this kind of stuff. And I've got a project starting shortly, which needs to do a lot of this work with Orchard. So I thought I'd build a little module, which the way NSwag works is it's reflection based. So it examines your codings on your controllers and will build you a client based on the models that you've previously defined. But what I thought I'd do was build something that would dynamically build models and a client pattern out of Orchard content types. Just as a little bit of experiment to see if it works, and it did. So here is a little demo on it. So this is the kind of thing it's not necessarily going to suit for everybody, but because of the project we've got coming up at the moment, which will be quite heavily API based, and involve a lot of mutations, which we don't have support for yet in GraphQL, this becomes kind of interesting. So I've done this. This is just with the Razor theme at the moment, which I'll show why later on. So we now have our host, and we've got all our usual kind of content types from the blog recipe, which we all know well. And this has got OpenAPI set up as well, so we can authenticate through it. And if we now go to Swagger, we get a list of the controllers and the endpoints that are available in standard Orchard Core, plus just a sample controller that I made myself. And you can make the queries on them, which we've all seen before. But what we also get here now is a schema. So every one of the content types that we've got, if I scroll down, I'll find one that's interesting. So every one of the content types that we've got now generates a specific scheme for all of its standard well-known properties, a part for its field properties, and all of the other parts that are available on it. So what we can do is we can leverage those to produce, and I'll show you over on the screen here, a C# client, which has both an HTTP client, which you can use to query. It's probably easier if I just show you on this little example here. So here's an example kind of using it with C#. We have a static HTTP client, which we use for the actual communications. We can get a token for authentication. We can get a content item from the content controller, and we can cast it to an actual usable piece of content. So if I run this, for example, you'll see just a little example of the kind of things that we're able to do kind of straight out of the box. So yeah, I'm just dumping what the content item is, but we're able to read them. We can then edit them and post them back just by setting properties, rather than having to use the kind of alteration type extensions that we need to when we're actually working inside Orchard Core. And we also from that also get a TypeScript client, which has the same kind of classes. Which we can use directly from TypeScript. Now, what we'll probably be doing from this is developing our own controllers for the operations that we need to do. And there'll be a lot of both reading data and then posting data back. So there'll be a lot of patch and patch, post and put, which is something that we just didn't have very good support for with GraphQL at this point. So we've needed to go down this route for it. And what else can we do from it? We can make queries on the Lucene controller or the queries controller. And it's going to say not found, probably because I'm not authorized. So I can authorize this with OpenAPI. Sorry, with
Here, a question I saw also in your code. You had, okay, here it's auth too, but you have enabled the OpenID module then.
Yes. So Swagger being API based, or everything that we're doing here is kind of API based. So I've enabled the OpenAPI module, sorry, the OpenID module to get authorization to the site.
And did you configure Swagger? Or is it just using the standard endpoints, connect/authorize and so on?
There's a small amount of configuration code for Swagger to tell it that these are the endpoints, but these are just the standard endpoints. Let me show you.
It's using OAuth in your case because you're in the web app. in the case of the client, the HTTP client, was he using client credentials?
Yeah, the client is using client credentials. Let me see here. Sorry, let me show you the two setups that I've done.
Okay.
So in this case, we've got two applications. The back end here is using the auth code flow because that's the right flow for this kind of scenario, I believe. And the console client is using a client credential flow. And in this case, I made a specific API role because it was relevant to just give, for this example particularly, very limited access to the system, but specific access for what we need.
Thank you.
So yeah, once we become authorized, we can probably now run our query. And you can see Swag has put in the access token or the bearer token that it received back from the OpenID flow. And again,
so now if I just want the content of the blog post, what do I do?
Oh, well, in that case, you use GraphQL. That's what GraphQL was for.
Okay. I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing you. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's really three kinds of APIs out there. There's the traditional REST API, which is these ones. There's the GraphQL, where you can ask for specific bits of information, and then there's the JSON API, which is very similar as well, where you can kind of browse and query through in this similar way, which you would with GraphQL. And I know Nick started some work towards a JSON API.
While you were doing the demo, I don't know if someone summoned Nick, but Nick's main joined, and I don't know if it's just by chance, like it didn't show up in 2 years, and we show JSON APIs, and then he shows up. I don't know if someone just told him.
I told him to join.
Okay. Why didn't you tell him a year ago that?
You'll just have to tell him to join every week, Antoine.
Hey guys.
How you doing, Nick?
Good man. You alright?
You're not bad.
Cool. This is cool, man. What? So is the client that you used to talk to? I missed the beginning of this, so I was actually asking a question about something else. So it is actually completely coincidence that I'm here. But the GraphQL side of things, the client that you were using to talk to it, what was that?
Right, so that probably is the bit that you missed at the start. This is totally not GraphQL related.
Oh, okay.
This is totally REST client.
Fantastic.
And so what it does is it's using NSwag to build a REST client out of what we can interrogate from the Swagger definition.
Cool.
So I would imagine you'd almost use both of these in certain scenarios. You'd use a GraphQL client for some of your querying, and this client for more of the mutations and updating, but it depends on what your needs are, really. Yeah,
that's wicked, man. Next question, OpenAPI wrapper. Have you used did you use an existing one, or is it one of the, so because you got the Swagger UI, is that the pull request that's currently on Orchard Core, or is that a different thing?
This is a different one. This is using, so I think the PR that is in Orchard Core at the moment is using Swashbuckle behind the scenes.
Yeah.
We moved to NSwag maybe a year or so ago, but just because we found the support better, mostly for client generation. We do a lot of TypeScript generation with it. So you kind of got Swashbuckle and NSwag are the two things.
And would you be willing to share that? Because at the moment I'm using the Swashbuckle one with Orchard Core, so it'd be cool to move away from that if I could.
Cool. Look, the whole thing is on my GitHub account here. It's on NuGet. I decided early on that this was kind of a little bit of a weird thing that some people will want and maybe doesn't need to be part of Orchard Core itself. So it's there. Have a try of it, see what works.
Yeah, man. I'll give it a go. What's the configuration like behind it? Is it pretty easy?
Yeah, it's reasonably straightforward. There's a sample project there. What you end up with is, on the Orchard side of things, there's a module. I put it in a module. There's a little bit of security stuff here just for the middleware to tell it what your flows are.
Good. That's been missing from the other ones, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's really helpful to be able to do that. And that's most of the configuration there. The client generation itself, I've got a models project here, which
the only thing we may need to think about in this, because I saw HTML part in that, is that it needs to work without the UI, without any references to UI projects. It needs, because it kind of needs to be UI agnostic on that startup.cs file. See how you got line 92, you got HTML body part. So that needs to really be moved around. But apart from that, it looks pretty cool, man. I like it.
Yeah, this one here is just because there's a slight bug in GraphQL at the moment. And I need to hide that part from GraphQL, or the GraphQL Explorer doesn't work.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So that's just a minor little thing. The models that it generates, or the schema that it generates, is stuff as such that you can see here. So these are the schemas that you'll kind of get by default out of the box, assuming you don't turn them off, are all content definitions. So if you make your own controllers, then you'll get your own controller definitions, and you can turn the content part off and not see the HTML body part and what have you.
Cool.
The reason it generates extra wrappers,
Oh, big schema, man.
it's a big schema, so it actually generates a wrapper of the HTML body part, because parts can have fields on them as well. So in this case, I've thrown a field onto it just for the sake of it, essentially,
Okay.
to prove that you can. But yeah, you can use content types if you want. You can just use your own parts. Or your own controller, which is, to be honest, we'll be doing more of it probably. Sorry, that's the wrong project. Where's the right one?
Mac. Yeah, it's cool. I'll check it out. I wouldn't mind moving away from what I'm currently using. So cool.
Yeah, just trying to progress it a little bit. I think it'll be useful. It's going to be useful for us, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, this will just automatically generate as any normal Swagger definition would, because it's got the action, because the OpenAPI will tell you how it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, so the interesting thing is we can use it from an API point of view, but I also found myself wanting to use it a little bit on the Orchard Core code point of view. So I generated a set of models that I can use within Orchard Core and transfer content items into these models in order to do mutations on them within code. So this is a little bit of a weirder thing. But for example, if we look at some of the where's a good test? So what we can do here is just make kind of a normal content item, and then turn it into a DTO, mutate it, convert it back from a DTO just with JSON conversions. So it's kind of become a little bit of a way to have hard-coded content types and content parts for when you're working quite heavily in code. Not entirely sure how useful this bit of it will be, but it was possible to do it, so I thought I'd see what would happen.
Okay, all right, that was cool. Yeah, I'll check out your repo. It looks pretty cool. The only thing that I think is missing maybe is to do with the API Explorer side of things, but it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, there's some changes I'd probably make to a couple of our controllers to actually explore the API a little bit better. Right now it's not that well described.
Yeah.
But
good for what you're using it for, though. So.
Yeah, it works for what we're using it for.
Cool. Nice, man. Yeah, I'll check it out.
Excellent. Enjoy. Let us know how you go.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's probably the most of it. Like I said, the repo's there. If this is useful for anybody, check it out. Have a play. Open an issue if it doesn't work. But of course it will work.
Thanks a lot. It's awesome. Good. Next, William, how long do you think it will take?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes.
Okay, let's do that, 15.
Okay, one of the things that this came up when I was talking with Antoine, I said, Antoine, I noticed that you have a dark theme on your, Orchard Court. How do you get the dark theme? And then basically he showed me a plugin that he did for the browser. And I said, oh, okay. So I thought it would be kind of interesting to go ahead and create a dark theme because I don't think we have one. So I used Bulma because it's easy and it's all CSS. I mean, it's Sass basically. So there's no JavaScript aligned with it. So you don't have to worry about security issues or vulnerabilities. They always keep it updated. And what's really nice about it is that it's modular. So you can take things out and add things which you don't want or whatever. So it's really super small and it's well documented and it's designed mobile first and it's compatible with all the different browsers. So in doing that, let's see here. I decided to use Webpack. So I know you guys use a different bundling tool, but being with Angular, Webpack is pretty popular. And so it was really easy to implement. So with Webpack, you can have different modes where you have production and development mode. And basically they have loaders and they also have plugins and such. So I'll go ahead and give you just a brief introduction of what I did. And so what I did is I actually took Webpack and I integrated into Visual Studio. So the Visual Studio does the Webpack build there. So, okay, so here's my Bulma dark theme. And so basically here, if you go to the source here, this is basically the Sass file here we talked about for Bulma. And you notice that everything's you can just load whatever components you want. And so if you don't need cards or tabs or media, whatever, you just take it out and it really reduces the size of your CSS here. And then you notice here's the Webpack configuration here. So I'm using some plugins, as you notice here. Minify, HTML Webpack plugin. So, and I won't go into a lot of this, and then I have just a simple package.json file that loads all the Webpack stuff and such. So I'm gonna go ahead and start Visual Studio and we'll just run it right from here. And you notice down here at the bottom, it says dependencies using NPM. This may take a few minutes. So it's actually building the doing the npm install, and then it will run the Webpack configuration to create the SAS files and compress all the images as well. I guess we could take a look at that. Let's see if we can. And there it's doing the Webpack right now. And you can notice that it built a distribution file. So here's all the files for the distribution that Webpack created. And then you notice we're starting up here, our Orchard core. Okay, so you fill in, we'll go ahead and select the Bulma dark theme here, and then just go finish setup. So here, you can notice here, you can actually, I have the login screen here. So we have the home screen, we have a blog screen, so it shows you all the blogs. And of course, we have taxonomies here, so we can switch on to taxonomies here. And here's travel. Go back, list all the tags, and here's all the different tags. So we can say go to Mars here. So we have our Mars. Hit back, and we can do our search. So we can say let's search for Mars. And go look at our contact here. So we can enter our contact information. So yeah, basically that's it. Just a nice dark theme, and it's really easy to implement. And one nice thing about it here is the only JavaScript that I had to do, basically, if we go into the views here and go into like the layout here, this is the only JavaScript that we did for the hamburger button here, and that's it. And you don't have to worry about, any other JavaScript. It's just what's here. So that's it. That's the Bulma dark
cool.
theme.
Is it on GitHub?
It is, yeah. It is on GitHub. And I'm doing a video on that this week. I got half of it done, so it should be out maybe tonight or tomorrow. So if anybody's interested.
Right, Bulma. Is it called the Bulma theme, or what do you call it?
Yeah, the Bulma dark theme. Yeah.
Okay. And if I want it light, how do I change?
What's that?
If I want it a light theme.
Oh, light theme. Yeah, I'm going to work on switching. Have a switch where you can switch between dark and light, and so that's one of my next tasks is to do that. And yeah, I'll incorporate that in the Bulma theme. It'll be a Bulma theme which will have dark and light. So that's my next task. Okay,
good job. Thank you. I'll do mine next week, maybe, if we have time. And I will share my screen, but there is no more to show. So next week I'll show you shortcodes library, and so I think we are done. Any questions, comments? Then we will see each other on Thursday, probably to ship RC2, unless last minute issue. And next week, I don't see anything blocking. So next Tuesday. So thanks everyone. See you on Thursday or next week. Bye bye.